I'm just gonna start off by saying this, and only this. The story is going to be a rather long one, but I truly believe that if I don't speak my mind about what happened, I honestly believe my brain will melt on my fucking ears. I seriously can't understand the motives of some people. The very fact of the matter that people extremely fucked up in the head are allowed to get away with shit that they shouldn't really pisses me off. It also makes me wonder what the hell the higher-ups of freaking Nickelodeon Studios were even thinking when they hired the people that they did. Because there's some seriously messed up people that need nothing else more than to be locked up in a goddamn asylum for the rest of their life. I know that might sound rather harsh, but believe me when I tell you that the kind of things that I've seen that people have actually animated and wrote could make any man's head spin off their fucking shoulders. One of these abominations is a SpongeBob episode by the name of Patrick's Diabetes. By now I'm sure that most of you who are reading the title of the video itself are most likely laughing, and I don't blame you at all. It is kind of funny, and a bit of just desserts for all the shit that Pink Bastard has done over the past few seasons, but I digress. Now, the way I actually came across this episode was kind of illegal. Basically, with the help of a friend of mine, I hacked into the system of Nickelodeon Studios. Yes, I'm not exactly proud of the things that I've done, but you can only learn from your mistakes and not repeat them again. My intention for hacking the company still isn't very clear to me, even to this very day. I guess if I did have to make an assumption, I was most likely trying to find some dirt on the company that I could expose, or some shit like that. What I do know, however, is that when I had finally finished the hacking process, everything that had to do with Nickelodeon was in the palm of my hand. I browsed around a lot on that site, and I found some rather neat things, like what new shows were going to be created in 2016, which were all shit by the way, the names, addresses, and phone numbers of popular animators and directors, and finally, a couple of selections that dived into legal notices, controversies, and rather mundane kind of crap. The first thing that I wound up searching around on was a section about the show of SpongeBob SquarePants. Now I know I'm not the only one here, but I freaking love SpongeBob. Yeah, the newer seasons are crap, but still, I freaking loved everything about the show. And to have secret documents, audio projects, and hell, even video footage for future episodes was like a winning lottery ticket. So, to put it bluntly, I went through everything that had to do with SpongeBob, browsed scripts that were either finished or not, listened to some audio footage of future songs, and even got to see some gossip about Steven Hillenburg as well. Then I found a section that I was the most eager to get into, the video footage. Almost immediately as I opened up the spot where the videos were at, I was met with not a whole lot, surprisingly enough. Maybe about 50 or 60 videos in total, but that was about it. Originally, I was initially disappointed, but all that changed when I started downloading the videos to my hard drive. It may not have been much, but hey, something's better than nothing. Once the downloads had been completed, I exited out of the hack site and went to go and view my treasures. As I expected, most of the videos were just full episodes of the show, with a couple of deleted scenes thrown into the mix. Now, this would have been great for me had I not already seen a majority of those episodes. If anything, most of the episodes there were just storyboards, which was still kinda cool, but nothing I was really expecting. I huffed a little bit at my disappointment. I guess karma really did come to bite me in the ass for fucking around on a studio website. I was just about to close my download files when I saw a video that was located on the top of the videos folder that I hadn't checked. It was crudely named patd1.mp4. I checked the length of the video and it was a long one, 36 minutes and 56 seconds to be exact. The thumbnail was way too small for me to read, but I will admit, this piqued my curiosity on many levels. Not wanting to waste time just staring at a blank computer screen, I quickly double-clicked the video and it started up. The first thing to hit me was the SpongeBob intro, and when I mean that it hit me, I mean that it was really freaking loud. I hadn't put in my headphones, I guess. After lowering the volume to save my eardrums, I grabbed the nearest pair of earbuds, lowered down my volume, and popped them into my computer, and then proceeded to continue watching the episode. Like I said before, the episode started up with the usual theme song and intro. Once that had ended, the scene cut to the title card of the episode with the phrase, "Patrick's Diabetes," written in pink and red font against a red and black background. Suspenseful music also playing in the background during the segment. I kinda laughed a bit at the title. I mean, it was pretty morbid, but at the same time, kind of awesome too. This actually had gotten me to think for a little bit. Was this episode something that the animators wanted to create to add a bit of a darker tone to SpongeBob? If this was it, then I wasn't really looking forward to seeing whatever fucked up shit that the creator decided to make. I've seen enough of new SpongeBob episodes to know that when it comes to dark episodes, the staff and crew are not really too great at doing it well, with the sole exception of the episode The Health Inspector. I braced myself for what I was about to see, knowing that it might be like the Splinter or even a pal for Gary, but 10 times worse. The episode started off with a panned-out view of Bikini Bottom, with the ever-so-lovable French narrator starting the introduction. "Ah, lovable Bikini Bottom, a place of wonder and of joy. Let us see what is new with our friend SpongeBob SquarePants." The scene then faded in for a bit before going right back to show SpongeBob sleeping in his bed. Then, without a warning, the foghorn sprang to life, causing the whole house to shake in the process. SpongeBob yawns and jumps down from the bed. "Good morning, Gary," SpongeBob calls out in his joyful manner. "Meow," Gary replies as he pops out from underneath SpongeBob's bed. "Oh, Gary, today's gonna be a great day today," SpongeBob says as he jumps around like crazy to a nearby drawer. "Meow?" Gary asks, confused. "Today is a day me and my best buddy Patrick get to enjoy an all-you-can-eat ice cream buffet at Goofy Goober's Ice Cream Party Boat," SpongeBob said, pulling out 2 tickets from the drawer. "Meow, meow, meow," Gary said, slithering up to SpongeBob. "Oh, come now, Gary. Patrick isn't fat. He's perfectly healthy," SpongeBob said, walking over towards his closet and getting himself dressed with his trademark outfit. "Meow," Gary called out, this time a bit more aggressive than earlier. "Gary the Snail, that was very rude. I'll have you know that my best friend Patrick is not a giant walking pink strawberry ice cream cone with eyes and legs. Now you take that back, mister," SpongeBob scolds. "Meow," Gary said, obviously getting a bit more cocky than before. SpongeBob gasped. "Gary, how could you say that about him? Patrick is not a giant chewed-up wad of bubble gum," SpongeBob says angrily. Gary seemed to be having a bit too much fun roasting Patrick, but just as he was about to make another comeback, SpongeBob shushed him. "I will not tolerate any more of your sassy behavior, young man. Now if you excuse me, I have a friend to go and eat ice cream with," SpongeBob huffed. SpongeBob then walked out of the room, down the stairs, and then proceeded to walk outside. Gary was shown looking out of the window, snickering as he wrote down a few more jokes in what I assumed was his joke book. The screen then cut back to SpongeBob, who was walking merrily down the road to Patrick's rock. SpongeBob then made his way towards said rock and began to knock on it. Patrick immediately popped out of the rock like a cannonball, smashing Squidward's house in the process. "It's Sunday, isn't it?" Squidward said with a sigh as he sipped his tea. "Come on, Patrick, let's go! Goofy Goobers opens up in less than 5 minutes," SpongeBob called out. "I'm coming, SpongeBob!" Patrick yelled out as he grabbed a large string that was, quite literally, attached to his butt and pulled it, causing him to launch like a cannonball all his way towards the ice cream shop at a speed of light. "Wait for me, Patrick!" SpongeBob called out once again. SpongeBob then laughs as he runs down the street and off camera. The scene then transitions over to, you guessed it, the inside of Goofy Goobers, with SpongeBob and Patrick waiting in line with a bunch of other fish. The scene then cuts to show one of the workers unlocking a small red ribbon that led to a large buffet table filled with various ice creams and toppings of all sorts. "The buffet is now open for business. Please have your tickets ready," the cheery young fish said. SpongeBob and Patrick then proceeded to go top gear, literally, with SpongeBob hopping on Patrick's shoulders and driving over customers. Various comical screams could be heard, including the infamous "my leg" quote as well. After mowing down a crap ton of Bikini Bottomites, as well as slamming their tickets into the Ticketman's face, they proceeded to make the biggest ice cream sundae that they could manage to hold in their sundae glasses, and head off to the table. "Thanks again for taking me to the buffet, SpongeBob," Patrick said, shoveling a giant thing of ice cream down his throat. "It's not a problem, buddy. Anything for you," SpongeBob winked. The two proceeded to eat their ice cream with little interruption. The bubble splash screen pops up, and it's at that point where we see the aftermath of the buffet. Ice cream is splattered all over the place, on the walls, on the ceiling. Hell, it was even in the inside the cracks on the wall. After displaying the scene of ice cream carnage, it cuts back to SpongeBob and Patrick. SpongeBob's stomach is bulging out of his pants, while Patrick, on the other hand, looks extremely obese. "Wow, Patrick, that hit the spot," SpongeBob said, burping. "Yeah, it was. Oh," Patrick groaned. "What's wrong, Patrick? You feel sick?" SpongeBob said. "No, it's..." Patrick began to gasp for air, and within an instant he fell to the ground with a heavy thud, the ice cream glasses shattering on the floor on impact. SpongeBob rushed over towards his friend, freaking out. "Patrick, are you okay?" SpongeBob said, shaking his best friend. Patrick said nothing for a bit, before he turned over on his back and let out a loud scream of agony and pain. Patrick's eyes rolled in the back of his head, and once he had stopped screaming, bile from the ice cream was pouring out of Patrick's mouth like a fountain. "Somebody call an ambulance!" SpongeBob screamed as Patrick continued to cough up ice cream and mushed up toppings. Two ambulance workers immediately walked up towards Patrick and proceeded to carry him into an ambulance with SpongeBob following them. The screen then faded into itself for a few seconds before fading back into a newer scene. SpongeBob was sitting down, rather impatiently, in one of the chairs in the lobby. Then a doctor, who was a completely new character, by the way, a blue anglerfish with matching blue eyes and doctor outfit. "Mr. SquarePants?" the doctor asked. "Doctor, please tell me he's okay," SpongeBob asked worriedly. "He's alive," the doctor said in a rather serious tone. SpongeBob was about to let out a yay of joy or something along those lines, until the doctor grabbed SpongeBob, pulled him close, and snapped, "I didn't say he was all right. He's only alive." SpongeBob went silent for a moment before looking down at the floor. "Look, kid, I'm sorry for snapping, but I don't want any foolishness right now. Your friend is in a diabetic coma at the moment. We're not too sure when he'll wake up, but until then, we're going to need to keep him here for some time," the doctor said, wiping his brow. "What? What happened to him, doctor?" SpongeBob asked, almost on the verge of tears. "I'm afraid that your friend is in a severe diabetic condition. He has type 2 diabetes. As of now, he's on dialysis for the time being," the doctor responded. Can I see him?" SpongeBob asked with tears in his eyes. Sure. Now, before I say anything, I need to go ahead and let you know that I've taken the liberty of calling over Patrick's parents as well to discuss certain matters with them," the doctor responded back. The two characters walked down a narrow hallway in complete silence for a few seconds. "I'm gonna warn you, kid, your friend is in a very bad condition as of right now. He's not gonna look like how he usually looks. You might, honestly, want to turn around when you see him," the doctor warned. "I understand," SpongeBob said. After the brief conversation, both the doctor and SpongeBob walked up towards a door where Patrick was supposedly in, and slowly opened it. What I saw next almost made me shit my pants. You know how the animators of SpongeBob tend to make some drawings a lot more realistic and freaky than usual? Well, this scene was a lot worse than anything I'd ever seen. The entire hospital room was a deep shade of red from floor to ceiling. In the middle of the scene itself was Patrick laying down in a hospital bed. His eyes are open wide and they're glassy. His body is rendered much more realistically, looking as if parts of his body were peeling off of him, and also next to his chin was what I assumed to be blood pouring down it. I made sure to show the image itself for anybody who actually wanted to see it. This scene in and of its own self was just a small taste of what was to come for that episode. I will admit though, after seeing that image, it immediately burnt itself into my brain for a lasting nightmare that would come in the near future. Despite being disgusted, I continued with the video. SpongeBob could be heard in the background, gasping in both fear and with pity for his best friend. The doctor himself starts to talk with SpongeBob about the various issues regarding Patrick and what was going on at the moment. All the while, the scene itself didn't cut away from Patrick's blood-covered face. After about 30 or 40 seconds of seeing nothing but Patrick's disheveled, bloated, disgusting face, the scene finally cut to show Patrick's parents walking into the room. "Oh my goodness, Patrick!" Patrick's mother yelled as she went to caress her son. "Don't!" the doctor snapped. "Not until he's stable." Patrick's mother backed away slowly from Patrick's still bleeding face, with a look that just read complete and utter despair. "Oh, sweetie, we didn't know you were this sick. We would have helped you," Patrick's mother said, with cartoony tears dripping from her face. "Actually, Mr. and Mrs. Starr," the doctor butted in, "I managed to look over Patrick's records as a child, his pediatrics, and let me tell you that you knew he was sick. You knew he was sick all along, and you did nothing," the doctor growled. "Wait, what?" SpongeBob said with a look of confusion and shock. "SpongeBob, here's a little history lesson for you with Patrick's parents. You see, it wasn't that little ice cream buffet that you gave him that gave him the diabetic shock in the first place. In fact, it was one of the long, drawn-out diet of grease and other fattening foods that his parents had fed him over the years that caused him to have this little event." SpongeBob looked shocked, and then he turned his head over towards where Patrick's parents were standing at. The two starfish parents looked completely guilty and shameful. "What?" SpongeBob said gasping. "Fine!" Patrick's dad yelled out. "Yes, we fed him some healthy food every now and then. So the hell what? He's our kid, and we can feed him whatever he wants. It's because of you two that my friend is even in this hospital to begin with," SpongeBob screamed back. The argument continued between the parents and SpongeBob for at least a good minute, before the doctor immediately shut them up by snapping again. "You all need to freaking calm yourselves down and shut up. If anything, you're both guilty of leading Patrick in here," the doctor said. "You all helped him get into this mess, and you're all going to help him get out." The scene then cut back to the horrifying picture of Patrick again, with Patrick's mother saying, "You're right. You're right." Patrick's mother could be heard crying in the background, as it slowly zoomed in deeper and deeper into Patrick's face. I ultimately had decided to pause the video and stop it for the day. I couldn't handle any more of that godforsaken picture. But more importantly, I wasn't even halfway done with the video, but taking a look at my watch, I saw that, well, it was already late. I needed to get to bed. I'll make sure to update this tomorrow when necessary. But trust me, it'll continue to get worse from here on out. The scene then cut back to the horrifying picture of Patrick once more. This time, however, his blood-soaked mouth moved a little bit, as if Patrick was trying to say something. I couldn't exactly hear what he was trying to say, so I just assumed that he was just mumbling and not really saying much of anything at all. The scene then cut back to both SpongeBob and his parents looking down at Patrick with a mix of guilt and shame spread across their faces. "Is there anything that we can do to help him?" SpongeBob asked. "As of right now, no. Your friend's in a coma, and we're not too sure when he's going to wake up from it. If he wakes up at all," the doctor muttered. Both SpongeBob and his parents both cringed at the very thought of Patrick dying. "The best thing I can say for you all to do is give him some time to recover. That's all I can say. The doctor chimed in before walking out of the door. SpongeBob and Patrick's family soon left the room as well, as it seemed like they really weren't really needed in the room. SpongeBob was the last one to walk out of the room and close the door shut. He takes a look around the hospital area to see if he can try and talk with Patrick's parents, but instead there was a note taped to the door, which SpongeBob pulled off. The camera then cut to show the contents of said note, which panned downwards as SpongeBob read it. Dear Mr. SquarePants, we both want to apologize for arguing with you back there. It wasn't right of either of us to talk to you like that in that kind of attitude. In fact, we deserve much more of a punishment for what we have caused Patrick to be in the state that he's in. So it's with a heavy heart that we relinquish any contact with our son for his sake. We both know for a fact that you'll be a better influence on our son's life, and so we put our trust in you that you'll help him get better. As for us, we don't want to cause any more problems, so we're moving away. It's honestly for the better. I'll be honest here, I didn't exactly get what both Patrick's parents were really trying to say, but it seemed like SpongeBob knew all too well. The camera cut to SpongeBob crumpling the note in his hands and throwing it down in a fit of anger, and then walks out of the hallway, and the scene fades out. After a few seconds, the screen returns. SpongeBob is in his living room, who apparently can't sleep due to the fact that he's been walking aimlessly all around in his house in his PJs. As he walks around the room, he starts to talk to himself. What am I gonna do? Patrick's parents were supposed to help with Patrick's condition, and they just run off like that? It's been 3 days. 3 whole days since I've heard from them. SpongeBob, in a fit of rage, beat his fist on the table. Talk about parents of the year, SpongeBob muttered angrily as he sat down on the table that he had struck. But I don't know what I'm gonna do. Patrick's not exactly the brightest light bulb in the closet, and trying to get him to keep him from eating sugar is like trying not to breathe for the guy. SpongeBob let out a defeated sigh and slumped his head over towards the tabletop. As he does this, the doorbell suddenly rings. SpongeBob gets up from his seat and casually walks over to the door and opens it up. Turns out it was Sandy and Mr. Krabs who was standing outside of the house. Mr. Krabs? Sandy? What are you guys doing here? SpongeBob asked. Well, me boyo, I heard about your little issue, and I just wanted to come over to see if you were all right, Patrick says in a rather selfless kind of way. And I'm here for the same reason, SpongeBob. How you been holding up? Sandy says in her usual country accent. It's been bad. Really bad, actually. Patrick's parents left him with nothing and just moved away like that. While I'm here wondering to myself how I'm going to help Patrick at keeping up with his diet, and most importantly, stressing out over the fact that I might... SpongeBob closed his eyes, and then closed his mouth shut and shuddered. Sandy and Mr. Krabs both looked at each other, and they both went up to SpongeBob and sat next to him, holding him, trying to comfort him. Hey, boyo. You don't need to worry so much. Patrick will be alright. He's a fighter, and he'll get through this. Yeah, SpongeBob, Sandy interjected. If Patrick can survive my numerous science experiments, the ice cold in my tree dome, and even having his water helmet off for a long period of time, I'm sure that he can survive this, Sandy said. The camera then panned down to SpongeBob, who looked up towards the others and smiled. Thanks, guys. It really means a lot to me that you'd... SpongeBob was interrupted with Squidward barging in the door and popping his head in. Is it true? Squidward asked before running in. Is it true that Patrick's in a coma? With diabetes? Squidward asked, this time with a hint of glee that made me feel rather unnerved. Yeah, SpongeBob said, his smile now gone and reverted back into his depressed form. Squidward then looks at the others for a bit, with a bit of shock, and then does something that nearly made me want to punch the living shit out of my computer screen in complete rage. Squidward proceeds to get a bunch of party decorations and start decorating them around the house in almost an instant, and begin to dance around and start having a party, chanting away as he danced, "No more Patrick! See ya, Starfish!" and other disgustingly mocking phrases. Both Sandy and Mr. Krabs look absolutely horrified, yet disgusted at the very sight of what Squidward was doing. However, SpongeBob just got up from where he had slouched down and lifted his head up to reveal a look of complete hate, anger, and rage plastered onto SpongeBob's face. SpongeBob slowly walked across the room where Squidward had set up a music box to play the typical party music that the SpongeBob series tend to play as, well, often as possible. And without another word, he grabbed the box, took it, and threw it on the ground, smashing it into pieces. Squidward then looked over at SpongeBob with an annoyed look. "Hey, where did the music go?" SpongeBob then turned his head. The same look of hate and anger splattered on his face, and he began walking, well, stomping actually, towards Squidward. Squidward, of course, walked backwards in fear at what SpongeBob was going to do to him. After a few seconds of walking backwards, Squidward backs himself into a wall. SpongeBob, now breathing heavily, glares at Squidward before grabbing him by the collar of his shirt and pulling him towards his face. "You better take that back, tentacles!" SpongeBob growled as steam poured out of his nose in anger like a wild bull. "Why should I?" Squidward taunted, albeit with much hesitation. As a response to this, the screen cut to SpongeBob letting out a loud scream before punching the wall just inches away from Squidward's head. "Why should you?" SpongeBob screamed. "I'll give you a reason why. My best friend is in the hospital right now, possibly dying from a disease that he can't even wake up from. He's in a coma. I'm sitting here stressed out like crazy, wondering if he's even going to be alive. And here you are dancing and partying like it's something to celebrate." Squidward starts to sweat profusely from his brow before turning the tables over to SpongeBob. "If anything, he deserves it for all the garbage that he's put me through. He stalked me, destroyed my house numerous times, ruined my Sundays, and so many other things. He'd be doing the world a favor if he just died already," Squidward yelled. The camera then went back to SpongeBob, who at this point had already had a death glare on him. His face started to become beet red with anger. Then in an instant, SpongeBob lunged at Squidward and literally started to beat the living shit out of him. And I mean about as brutally as you would think. He knocked out a few of Squidward's teeth, broke his nose, and gave a few black eyes as well. In fact, the brawl itself was becoming so bad that both Sandy and Mr. Krabs had to run up and restrain SpongeBob. Once SpongeBob had been restrained, the camera went back to show Squidward, who was now cowering in the corner as cartoony blood poured from his nostrils and mouth. "If you ever want to blame someone, blame me. I'm the one who made the decision between the two of us. He's not to blame here, I am. Patrick doesn't know any better. He can't even eat without my help." SpongeBob screamed at the top of his lungs. "SpongeBob, calm down," Sandy interjected. "Yeah, boyo, don't let him get in your head," Mr. Krabs began. "But you need to stay strong for Patrick." SpongeBob at this point calmed down a little bit, but still retained that pissed off look. The scene then cut to Squidward, who finally gets himself up, shaking. He then looks over at the angry Sponge. "Get out and never come back," SpongeBob says coldly. Squidward begins to cry as he runs out of SpongeBob's house and back into his own. Sandy and Mr. Krabs both place SpongeBob down, and SpongeBob immediately starts running towards the hospital, to which Sandy and Mr. Krabs, in a surprised kind of way, run after him. The scene then fades back to the hospital area, with the sole exception of it being nighttime, with SpongeBob running down the road and into the hospital itself. The screen then cuts to SpongeBob running towards Patrick's door, until he crashed, as well as with Sandy and Patrick, into the doctor from earlier on in the episode. "SpongeBob, what in tarnation's gotten into you?" Sandy yelled. "Yeah, boyo, what are you thinking?" Mr. Krabs rebutted. "I'm sorry, I just need to see him," I just need to see him. SpongeBob's cries out. Well, it's a good thing that you actually all showed up. Before I continue, I need to ask. Are the two of you friends or acquaintances of Mr. Star? The doctor asked Sandy and Mr. Krabs. Yes, Doc, we are, Sandy responded. Well, I was gonna call you, but since you're all here, I'm afraid I have some bad news. Your friend in there isn't doing well at all. In fact, just now, he's gone, the doctor said. Everyone's eyes widened in shock at this message. SpongeBob, it looks like he's at the point of a freaking mental breakdown. What do you mean he's gone? SpongeBob whimpered. Besides the machines that he's hooked up to, I'm afraid that your friend's nothing else more but a vegetable now. We've done everything that we possibly could to try and help him, but we just don't know what happened. He just started convulsing, and by the time we got there, he was already gone. The only things that are obviously keeping him alive now are the machines. Now, I know that this is hard to take in, but I'm sorry. I'm really sorry for your loss. Now, before I say or do anything else, I need to ask you if it's okay for me to pull the plug, the doctor asked. How long ago did he? Sandy whimpered, just as he walked in the door. I'm sorry again, everyone. Now, if you'd like, you can go and say your goodbyes before I, pull the plug, the doctor said solemnly. All three of them nodded in agreement, and then proceeded to Patrick's room. I honestly, at this point, felt really bad for everyone. Well, with the exception of Squidward, that is. I mean, now that I think about it, I can really see why this episode wasn't aired. I mean, for one, the entire episode itself was very mature for a SpongeBob episode, which, in my honest opinion, really isn't that bad of an idea. I mean, it'd be awesome, but I could kind of see the trouble, and the fact of the matter that it would get so much backlash from fans and parents alike. Anyway, upon making their way into the hospital room where Patrick laid at, the screen faded once more, and then faded to show Patrick's nauseating face. However, this time, it was so much worse. Like before in the episode, everything was pitch red, with the usual hospital equipment and the like. However, Patrick himself was honestly 10 times worse than what he originally looked. His body, from the lower jaw down to his stomach, showed the bottom jaw of Patrick's skull, followed by his windpipe and his internal organs. Now, compared to how a normal human being's internal organ structure is supposed to be, the way Patrick's organs were laid out was like a fucking dumpster. His lower as well as larger intestines were pushed up towards the front of Patrick's windpipe. His heart was lying dead center in the middle of the gory mess, not moving, not beating. Now, I've seen a lot of that gore. I mean, I stared at it for quite some time. I don't know why I did, but I did. And I know for a fact that there were at least a stomach or something else that was there. But honestly, if there were any there, it would have probably been overlapped by the mess of small intestines that were there. So maybe it might have just been my imagination at the time, but I don't even know anymore. Now, I know that the image itself is rather gross, but to be honest, after seeing that image, I wound up skipping lunch that day. After a few minutes of this image showing and everybody else pretty much crying like crazy, which in and of its own self was relatively understandable. I mean, their friend had just died. It finally cut back, And back to Sandy, Mr. Krabs, and the doctor standing next to Patrick's bed once more. SpongeBob, as you would have guessed, was crying hysterically, with much more seriousness than his comedic crying habits that he usually has in the show. Everyone at this point starts to take their turns saying their last words to Patrick. SpongeBob starts up first. I'm so sorry, buddy. I'm sorry that I wasn't there to help you. I'm sorry for all the times that I fed you all that junk. I'm sorry for being a bad friend to you. I'm so sorry. Had I known that this would have happened, I wouldn't have taken you to Goofy Goobers. I would have taken you somewhere else. We could have went jellyfishing. We could have went somewhere else. We could have went somewhere else, buddy. But no. And I knew that you were sick, too. At least that's what I remember seeing. I'm sorry, buddy. I'm a failure. I failed you. I failed you. SpongeBob then falls down to the floor and continues to cry. Sandy is the next one to speak. Hey there, Patrick. Hi. Well, I really... Sandy pauses for a bit, trying to find some kind of right words to say. She sighs and then places her hand on Patrick's shoulder. I want to thank you, Patrick. If it wasn't for you and SpongeBob, I wouldn't have really gotten to know Bikini Bottom so well. In fact, I really do consider you a friend. Sure, you were a little bit of a nuisance sometimes, but you were a great friend to me. Thank you for everything. I really am grateful. I'm definitely going to be playing you one of my songs during your funeral. I promise you, Patrick, I'm going to make sure of it that funeral is amazing for you. You've been a very good friend to me. You really have been. You've been a good friend to everyone. You may have messed up in the past, but you know what? That's fine. We all do. But you're different. You couldn't control half the things that you did. I'm also sorry for ever wanting to kill you or act nasty to you. If anything, I probably would, if I'd known what would happen now, I would have... Sandy pauses once more and wipes away a few tears from her eyes. I would have shown a lot more how much I appreciate you being a friend to me. I would have done that for you. Thank you so much for being a good friend to me, Patrick, and thank you for helping me get over my thing with Texas. Thank you. Sandy then steps back and starts to slowly cry as well, although not as hard as SpongeBob was. Mr. Krabs was next. He had a look of complete guilt and shame on his face as he stared down at Patrick's limp body. Hey, boyo. Where do I begin? I know I've not been good to you. I really haven't. I haven't been good whatsoever, actually. I've used you for money. I've done so many horrible things. I really don't even know. Well, actually, I do know. Boyo. SpongeBob told me a lot how you actually look up to me. I'm surprised that you'd actually want to look up to me like that, despite the fact that I'm a cheapskate. Patrick, I had a family member that I lost as well to diabetes. I'm gonna change myself, Patrick, just for you. I promise you I'm gonna do that to you. I'm gonna help pay for all your funeral. I'm gonna make sure of it, like Sandy said, that your funeral is about as great as it possibly can be. I don't care how much money I wind up spending. I'm gonna change my ways for you, Patrick. I promise you that. That's not ever going to stop. I'm gonna change myself and be a better crab to you, SpongeBob, to my daughter Pearl, and more importantly for you too, Patrick. I guess that's really all I have to say. Thank you for being a good friend to me, even when I know I really didn't deserve it. I do consider you a friend, and thank you. Mr. Krabs sat back, and then, with that, the doctor took the sheets and covered Patrick's head with it. He then, and once he does that, he pulls the plug, and the heart monitor flatlines. The doctor takes one final look at Patrick, and then to the others, and nods his head. The episode cuts to black once more, and it's at there that I decided to pause it. I don't know why exactly, but I need a little bit of time to really recover from that part. Yes, I know it was quite some time, but it still gets to me. I can promise you one thing, though. The next update I do is not going to be as heartwarming or anything like such. It just isn't. After a few seconds, the episode finally faded back in. This time it shows the inside of the morgue, which I presume to be the place where Patrick's body had been placed. The outside window shows a deep night sky with a vast amount of stars, followed by a full moon illuminating parts of the darkened morgue. After a few seconds of this, the camera pans over slowly towards one of the shelves that holds one of the dead bodies. Then it begins to vibrate in a way that was rather hard to notice, maybe because of the lack of lighting in the scene, although, despite all that, I could still hear it. After a few seconds of this, the shaking stops and everything goes right back to normal. Or at least what was normal in this video, that is. The scene pans out to show a doctor of some sort walking into the morgue and turning on a few lights. Alright, let's see what new buys we got today. Seems to have a one by the name of Patrick Starr. Is that his name? The doctor says as he walks over towards the drawer that had been shaking and opens it up. He pulls out a large body bag and places it onto an operating table, most likely for an autopsy. As he unzips the bag, he removes it from Patrick's body and begins cutting the skin from the top part of Patrick's bottom jaw all the way down to his belly button and back up. There, he proceeds to remove the now severed chunk of skin, revealing the same pulsing, realistically rendered internal organs, entrails, and beating heart. Fucking hell, that clip still gives me chills to this very day. As the doctor proceeded to grab a few of the operating tools from a small table near him, the camera zoomed into Patrick's face. Then, without warning, Patrick's eyes snap open, revealing bloodshot, pupilless eyes that seem to just stare off into nothingness. Patrick then proceeds to let out a loud scream, which causes the doctor to fumble with fright with the tools in his hands. "What the heck is going on?" the doctor yelled, completely panicked. Patrick then grabs the man's hand and begins pulling it towards him, towards his now shaven bottom jaw. The jaw itself clamping down on itself after a few seconds with the sound of teeth hitting bone. The doctor desperately tried to pull away, even slashing at Patrick a few times with a scalpel to make him stop. But it was all done in vain, as Patrick immediately clamped down in the hand, biting the top part of the hand off below the wrist. Cartoony blood began to spew out of the doctor's hand as he screamed out in a mix of pain and agony. The scene then cut to the front office desk and lobby, with a few more doctors and nurses dropping everything that they were doing and rushing over towards the room that the screaming had come from. However, once they opened up the door to the room, everyone gasped. Funny thing though, however, once they opened up the door to the room, nothing else happened after that. It didn't cut away to the rest of the doctors, and it didn't cut away into the interior of the room. Which in retrospect was great, because what happened afterwards in these last few minutes of the episode was more than my stomach could honestly handle. The screen then faded to black for about 3 seconds before a time card read, 3 days later, with the usual French narrator in the background saying it. The scene then cut back to show Sandy's tree dome at night, to which it then panned into Sandy's treehouse, with her pouring herself a cup of tea, followed by her walking out of her treehouse and onto the base of the tree dome. She sighs and sits down next to her picnic table. I'm sure am feeling bad for SpongeBob. Poor little guy. Can't I be blaming him, though. He did lose his best friend, Sandy said as she took a sip from her tea. I'm just glad that Mr. Krabs gave him the month off, with pay, of course, so that he can mourn properly. It's a good thing, though, that Mr. Krabs really kept his word. Just as Sandy was about to take another sip of her tea, there was a soft groan that played in the background. Sandy immediately turned her head towards the source of the sound, to which the camera followed suit, but nothing was shown. The scene panned back over towards Sandy, who just shrugged and continued drinking her tea. When she was finished, she yawned and made her way inside of the treehouse. The scene lingered on for a bit with the scene of the treehouse door. That is, until a faint shadow could be seen in the background. The camera then cut back to the inside of Sandy's bedroom, with Sandy lying down in her bed in her pajamas with the lights off. She starts to snore, but then the same groan from before plays louder this time. Sandy's eyes immediately shot open at this, and she turned on her bedroom lamp. This part made me shit my fucking pants. Out of Sandy's view, behind her that is, was Patrick, from the front side. His entire body was a palish pink color. His eyes were bloodshot, pink around the edges and pupilless, and the skin from his lower jaw to his belly button was exposed, showing what looked like a giant mouthful filled with guts and other internal organs. Sandy sighs a bit and then proceeds to shut off the light. As she does this, the same groan could be heard, but this time much louder than before. Sandy wakes up and does the same thing, but instead of Patrick being near her, he's nowhere to be seen. Sandy takes the time to start looking around her room, but sees nothing. Just as Sandy is about to shut the lights off for the last time, Patrick immediately falls from the ceiling and crash lands onto Sandy, muffling her screams in the process. The camera then cuts to the lamp falling to the ground, shattering into small pieces. All the while, the sounds of Sandy's muffled screams, along with Patrick's moans, could be heard for a few seconds, before the sound of a neck snapping could be heard. Everything goes silent for a moment, before the sound of eating, tearing flesh, and blood splattering in the walls and dripping down to the floor could not only be heard, but also seen. The screen fades once more, and this was about the time that I nearly shat bricks, as questions started to fill my mind. After taking another quick breather, I continued with the episode. The camera then cut back to show Squidward's home for at least a few seconds in the interior, before cutting to Squidward sitting on his couch watching TV, with a bored expression on his face and bandages around his, head, and a missing tooth, from where SpongeBob had repeatedly beat the living shit out of him. Suddenly, there was a knock at Squidward's door, to which he ignores. The knocking grows louder and louder until Squidward looks as if he's about to kill someone. He immediately stomps over towards the door, opens it, and looks outside. The camera pans both right and left to show what is there, but there's nothing. Squidward huffs in agitation before slamming the door shut and going back to watching television. After about a few seconds into this, the knocking sound returns, to which Squidward goes absolutely berserk in less than 2.5 seconds. He even smashes his own door down in a fit of anger and rage. "Okay, whoever you are, it's not Halloween, so get off my property!" Squidward yells. After he finishes that sentence, Squidward started to look around his home, trying to find the source and the culprit of the knocking. As he continues to walk around his home, he looks over at his garden area and notices movement right next to the shed. He decides to go and walk over there. "I'll show that little pest what's for. I'll get my rake and the next kid to ding-dong ditch me is getting a face full of metal teeth," Squidward said, grunting in anger. Walking towards his shed and opening the door, Squidward immediately reached his hand up in the air to pull on the light cord. However, the room failed to be illuminated by the light bulb. Squidward, now completely agitated and, at this point, begins to start searching around for his rake in the darkness. As he does this, he bumps into something and falls to the ground. "What the heck was that?" Squidward says as he looks up. Towering above him was a shadowy figure, which, to be honest, I couldn't exactly make out due to how dark the scene was. The camera then cut back to Squidward, who began to get right back up, but as he does this, something kicks him in the stomach and he falls right back down to the ground. "Hey! What's the big idea?" Squidward calls out. And then in an instant, the towering figure walks near one of the windows of the shed, allowing the dimness of the moonlight to illuminate its, or rather his, face. As I had expected, it was Patrick. Face blank, eyes still bloodshot, and mouth still stretched in that nightmarish way. The camera then cut back to Squidward, who now starts to panic at this point. He screams and makes his way towards the door, but just as he's about to open it and flee, Patrick's arm grabs Squidward by the collar of his shirt and slowly but surely starts to drag him closer and closer and closer to the pink menace. Patrick then presses his face right next to Squidward, leaving only a few inches of room to separate them. "Patrick, please, I'm sorry, okay? I didn't mean for you to... I didn't mean to say those things that I did. Please, Patrick, don't hurt me." Squidward mutters, almost on the verge of a mental breakdown. Patrick just glares at Squidward, and then his facial expression changes from a blank stare to one of pure anger and rage. I mean, if Patrick had done this beforehand in his normal way, it wouldn't have been that scary, but I swear that face itself will forever haunt my dreams as I sleep each night. Squidward lets out a loud scream before Patrick opens his jaw wide and bites down on Squidward's neck. One disgusting crack and tearing of skin is all that it took before the rest of Squidward's body fell to the ground, headless. Like before with Sandy, the scene cuts to only show the bottom half of Squidward's body as Patrick begins to eat the now severed head of Squidward, groaning as he did such. It was at that point that I was really confused. For one, how the hell did Patrick manage to come back after dying in the hospital? And, I mean, was he still in that coma? It just didn't make sense. But I think the most important question is, why was he killing his friends? Okay, I kind of get Squidward, but why everyone else? The episode didn't really make that much sense in the long run, but that honestly did nothing to soften the blow of this messed up fuckery that I was being subjected to. The scene then cut immediately to SpongeBob sitting down on his couch in his pajama pants like normal. This time, however, he's holding a picture of him and Patrick. He sniffles and places the picture on a small table near his couch. "I miss you so much, buddy," SpongeBob said sadly as he lied down on the couch. "I wish I helped you out more. I wish I had done more to help you. I just want you back, Patrick. That's all I want," SpongeBob said once again, a small tear rolling down his cheek. With that done, SpongeBob immediately sat right back up, turned off the TV in the living room, gets up from where he was lying down at, and begins walking up the stairs into his room. But just as he's about to crawl himself into bed, the sound of Gary's screaming and the sound of glass shattering could be heard in the background. SpongeBob immediately runs out of the room and bolts down the stairs and into the kitchen. Then he turns on the light, and later reveal Patrick standing in a corner chewing on something. "Patrick?" SpongeBob says with a mixture of shock, fear, and awe. Patrick doesn't answer him. Instead, he just continues to munch on whatever it was that he had in his hands. "Patrick!" SpongeBob calls out once again, this time a bit louder. The camera then cuts back to Patrick, who slowly starts to turn his entire body around to face his best friend. Once he finally did, I could kind of see what he had been eating. Pieces of shell, snail slime, and chunks of Gary's body were splattered all over him, coating the entirety of his exposed organs and flesh in a sleek shine of slime. The camera cuts back to SpongeBob, who is now shaking like crazy. He begins to sweat profusely, and tears pour from his eyes like a fountain. Patrick drops the rest of Gary's half-eaten remains, and then proceeds to run at SpongeBob. SpongeBob at this point immediately sees this and dodges it, running deep into the kitchen and pulling out a spatula. "Listen to me, Patrick. I don't want to hurt you," SpongeBob said as he waved his spatula around threateningly. Patrick turns right back to SpongeBob and lets out a disgustingly wet gurgling sound before walking towards a knife holster and pulling out a small blade. "Oh, hungry," Patrick says in that wet voice of his. "Patrick, please. Please, just put the knife down," SpongeBob begs. Patrick grins, and his teeth grind against each other in an ear-bleeding fashion. Then without another warning, Patrick lunges at SpongeBob again, and then proceeds to knock the spatula out of SpongeBob's hand. At this point, there was a huge struggle between the two, with SpongeBob blocking Patrick's jabs and attacks, while at the same time begging his best friend to stop what he was doing, although it seemed to me that they really weren't working for him. Finally, Patrick had wound up pinning SpongeBob down to the ground, and Patrick immediately grabs SpongeBob's hands and begins to bite down on it, ripping chunks of his flesh, fingers, and everything else away from it. SpongeBob, screaming in agony and looking around, trying to find some kind of device he could use to defend himself. He takes one look, and with his free hand, he finds a skillet. He pushes Patrick away for a split second, managing to free his hand away from Patrick's grasp. Then, with his now free hand as well as his mutilated one, SpongeBob grabbed the skillet and smashed it against Patrick's head with every single ounce of force that he could possibly give. Patrick immediately goes limp for a few seconds. He stays like that for a few seconds before falling down on the floor in a heap. SpongeBob then climbs up to Patrick and begins to bash in Patrick's head with the skillet, all the while screaming, "I'm sorry," over and over and over again. The skillet itself continued to hit Patrick during the duration, sending wave after wave of blood, smashed brain, and cracked skull everywhere. It was disgusting, yet at the same time, horrible. Completely horrible. And finally, with one final swing, SpongeBob takes a skillet and smashes it right down on Patrick's head one last time, sending a disgustingly wet cracking sound. After a few minutes of SpongeBob sitting there breathing heavily, he then falls to the ground and bawls his eyes out, screaming as he does so, before the episode cut to black for a final time and ended. Now do you see why I think that the writers are demented fucks? The video itself was nothing else more than a fucked up torture porn of SpongeBob, who not only wound up losing his best friend to a horrible disease, but also wound up losing Sandy and his pet Gary, and having to kill his best friend in order to save his own life. I mean, if that isn't disgusting and demented as all hell, then I don't know what is. I will say, though, I am grateful that this episode never really aired. However, I'm also grateful, albeit, is the fact of the matter that at least I've seen this. At least I know for a fact why the creators themselves are a sick bunch of people. No, I don't particularly hate these individuals, but I think they are disgusting. They truly are disgusting people for making something as insensitive as this. That's pretty much everything else. Thank you guys again for listening to my story. It still sucks, however, that I'm not able to upload any footage of this story, with the few exception of a couple of screenshots, but even then, though, I'm pushing it. But I'll try and do what I possibly can to make sure I spread the truth behind these disgusting people as much as I can. That way that the people making this will realize that we won't tolerate or stand for any of these things ever again.